Hello, everybody. This is Tony Cho, and welcome to another episode of Regenerative Living. This topic, which is very meaningful to me, is actually going to be on regenerative dying, death and dying, and how this experience with Ximena's passing and leading up to it has been in many ways very painful, but also regenerative in the way that something this impactful can also help be a very high growth opportunity for spiritual development. And grief can be a powerful tool to really help elevate oneself. And I think, today is day 50 since Ximena passed on June 17th, 11 days after her 47th birthday. 4 plus 7 equals 11. A lot of angel numbers in my world and universe, and a lot of miracles that I've been hearing happening all over the globe from our community. People sharing stories of hummingbirds coming into their house, people sharing stories of incredible double and triple rainbows, the most glorious and incredible sunrises and sunsets. And just this, my friend Vicky in Ibiza, that's known Ximena probably for 30 plus years. They worked together in Hugo Boss in Madrid in Spain, who's actually coming to Burning Man, that had something, a big deal she was working on, happened at 11/11. So I think there is this opportunity through death and dying and through grieving of making the process something that actually brings people together and makes us go deeper in ourselves and gives us more intention and more of a purpose for living our lives with more intention. And I always said that Ximena never liked attention, but she always wanted to focus on living with intention. And I've noticed, even by counting the days since my beloved ascended and she passed on to the ethereal realms, that I'm more present in making each day really count, and starting with meditation and gratitude with the sunrise, and finishing with gratitude and meditation and presence with the sunset. And this ritual around living, but also this ritual around dying, is something that is very, very meaningful and something that's very important. And I think in Western cultures, we're taught to biohack or avoid death at all costs. And we're taught that that death is something to be feared. But death is the most natural thing that we will all experience in our life. And it's not something to run from, but it's something gracefully to walk towards. And I think Ximena really taught me so much about how to gracefully dance with death, but also how to walk towards death with a certain amount of, with a deep amount of reverence and a deep amount of appreciation for the very blessing and the very magic that every breath in life affords us. And Ximena, at the end of her life, she had cancer throughout her lungs and it had metastasized in various parts of her body. She struggled. She had a cough for the last year that was really very debilitating in many ways. And she struggled to breathe and was on oxygen the last 2 weeks of her life. And I think that created, a certain amount of anxiety, but it also created a certain amount of gratitude and awareness around how important the breath is as a through line for our lives. And so many of us take the breath for granted, but the breath is everything. The frequency of our breaths, the number of times that we breathe in and out in a minute, the expelling of that energy. And some people, including my grandmother, who's a spiritual teacher, believe that we're only given a certain amount of breath in this life. And becoming a master of that breath can determine the quality and the longevity of your life. Because if you're always angry and you're always rushing around and you're constantly wasting or squandering this precious breath that is our life force, then you are not going to live a very fulfilled, and you'll probably live a shorter life because you're not really maximizing and really appreciating and savoring the privilege that it is to take a breath. So I'll never forget the last moment that Ximena took her last breath. And it was a really powerful moment. It was at 12:22 on the morning of June the 17th. And I was talking to somebody yesterday, and what was really inspiring about Ximena is that she didn't have a fear of death. She had a zest for life, but she had a reverence for death. And the veil was really thin between life and death. And I think what's really important is to have this passion and desire for life, to have this will to live, but not to have a fear of death. And if we can all embrace this will and this passion and appreciation and gratitude for life, but also be able to walk closely with death, because death is there with us by our side all the time, at every moment, whether we like it or not. He or she, or whatever you want to personify death, or the energetic shift of one form or one state to another. Death is present because any one of us could go at this moment. And Ximena did work with psychedelics. Ximena did work with plant medicines. Ximena and I did work with divinations of many different traditions, from the Tibetan traditions of the wheel of samsara, to the indigenous traditions of the four directions, to the Egyptian traditions of the temple of Ma'at, where you go in the last phase of your life, where the goddess Ma'at weighs your heart against that of a feather, of an ostrich feather, to see how light-hearted your life was, to determine where you go in the afterlife and how amazing it's going to be. And during that divination and during that experience, that spiritual work that we did, which I think was hugely beneficial to Ximena, you go in your felucca and you go around to the temples of Osiris and Isis and all the different Egyptian gods and goddesses, and really get to connect with the divine feminine, the divine masculine, and really get to resolve those issues within your own body, within your own energetic frequency. And I think that that was hugely important for Ximena in being able to embrace death with the grace and the courage and the wisdom that she had, because she didn't fear death. She wasn't scared of death. She was fearful of leaving me, and if I was going to be okay, since she was such a big pillar and a support in my life, her family and her friends. And she wanted to live more on life because she loved this planet with every cell in her body. She worshiped Mother Earth and the beauty and the majesty and the abundance that this planet offers us. And I think that there's something really beautiful in terms of the way that she prepared over the last 2-3 years of shedding things that she didn't need, spiritually shedding things, emotionally shedding things, and physically. She would go through her closets at Chosen and here in Miami and get rid of things, and preparing for her to depart because she didn't want to leave a mess when she left. And that's a very regenerative thing to do. And so I think there's a regenerative approach to dying, to death and dying. And then I think there's the more traditional, morbid approach where it's very dark and it's scary and there's a lot of fear associated with that. And not to say that there's not a lot of tragic, painful, unnecessary early deaths. And I think Ximena was one of those people that left way too early, just like my grandmother at 72. So much more life force, so much more apparent benefits and gifts to bestow. And What we don't know is what the universe has planned for souls like Ximena and like my grandmother, who are now working from the other realms in support of all of our spiritual guidance, all 8 billion of us on this planet and all of the species, that are here. And I do feel that if you can be present and if you can connect with that spiritual energy, then you yourself can be uplifted by these teachings. And through my pain and through my grief in this process, I've really found a lot of comfort in knowing how graceful and how beautiful and how fearless Ximena was during this process, and how prepared she was for leaving things better than when she arrived. She didn't want to have a lot of baggage in any way, any loose ends, unfinished business. She wanted everything set, and she did. She had it all cleaned. Her conscious, her karma, not that she was a perfect person, not that she didn't have insecurities, not that she didn't have trauma, as we all do, but Ximena was pure light. And I think she transmitted that light through the process of her own transition in healing us all, if you can look at it as a healing, because it's easy to get caught up in the sorrow, which is really the first phase of grief, is the sadness, the loss, the bereavement, and the emptiness that we feel when we don't have someone in the physical. And if we're attuned enough to the spiritual lesson and the tools and the gifts that are bestowed from us during these very fertile, powerful, sacred moments of transition, there's so much to be gleaned, so many nuggets of wisdom, so many blessings. And I know that Ximena is here with me. I feel her supporting me, uplifting me. I feel her, like I said, in every blade of grass, in every tree, in every river, in every sunrise, in every sunset. Her essence is there guiding me. I feel like I can connect with her. I can ask her questions. I can get feedback. And none of the human limitations of, resisting your wife telling you what to do or how to be, all of that is not there. And one thing that I also found very beautiful in this post-life, in the physical story of Ximena, is that it's been like a great wave of cleansing, of old baggage, of old relationships, of stale energies with people maybe that something was off or didn't go right, or there was some conflict in the past. In many ways, all of that has been erased by Ximena's grace and her beauty. Folks and people that I haven't heard from in years, decades, have come in support and have surrounded me with love and wanting to feel close to Ximena's essence. And oftentimes in death and dying and in grieving, people are taught to let go, release that person, release the connection, because that dependency creates pain. And I look at it a little bit differently. From my perspective, what has brought me comfort was actually figuring out a way to integrate the beauty and the energy of Ximena that balanced me out, that divine feminine, that 100% presence for everyone and everything, that highest level of integrity in every moment of really trying to be and show up in the best way, being the best person that you can. And so my takeaway in this time in my life is, how do I learn from and integrate the essence of Ximena into my own being, such that I feel the balance of the yin and yang of the passive aggressive type A untethered personalities that Ximena and I that created this divine union together, and how do I integrate that into one soul by being enhanced by Ximena's soul merging with my soul. And it's been really beautiful and very comforting. And there's a couple of books that I've started to read that are very powerful. One is called The Wild Edge of Sorrow by Francis Weller. People may be familiar with this one. And another one is The Smell of Rain on Dust, Grief and Praise by Martin Pretschel. And there are many books on death and dying, and there are many ways to look at grief and grieving and sorrow. But one thing is for sure, we all are going to lose everything that we love at one point in our lives. And the Buddhists speak of this concept of impermanence and detachment. And I think that love and deep and profound love, like the type of love and the sacred union that I had with Ximena, is very rare, but it is possible for everyone. And I feel like it takes a certain amount of courage and commitment to love, because we know that we're going to lose that which we love the most. I mean, I think about my puppy Aki, who has become an essential piece of my healing process even before Ximena passed. And the magnitude of love that I feel towards this being is almost unexplainable. And the amount of comfort that I find in having this beautiful, loving, unconditionally supportive, happy spirit next to me at all times is immeasurable. The amount of gratitude that I feel, and I know that I won't have this being in my life in the physical form forever. And that has to be part of the journey, is the acceptance of the impermanence of all things and all beings. And it's not an easy lesson, and it's something that I'm really learning day by day. It's a day by day process. And so I really feel that the way that Ximena went about her journey, particularly in the last 2 or 3 years, was actually quite some of the most beautiful and poignant and real moments that were really focused on intention. And we danced up until the last month or so, even the last couple of weeks before she passed. I can't wait to share some of those most tender moments with you all, where she just had so much gratitude for the life. And, she told me a couple of weeks before she passed how grateful she was for the life that we created together, that we co-created, and for all of the abundance and all of the magic and all of the experiences that we had together. And I'm forever grateful for the 17 years that we had together, the 27 years that we knew each other, and the lifetime of honoring her memory, her legacy, her lessons, her teachings, and how they will live on in me and our entire community around the world. And that's a regenerative expression that death has taught me and our entire community. So how will you look at death as a part of a regenerative circular process, since all of us are going to die at one moment or another? Have you thought about how you want to die? Have you thought about who you want by your side? There's one thing to have a will and to have an end-of-life medical order or wishes. There's another thing on how you want your legacy to be carried out. What type of flowers do you want in your memorial? Who do you want to be there? What type of music do you want to have while you're passing? Ximena was fortunate enough and blessed enough to be able to co-design that with me and our community. And that's something that's really rare and really special. But it was something that was intentional. And we avoid death. And my invitation to everyone here is to not avoid death, but to embrace death with a passion, with a familiarity, with a proactive approach, so that when you're there, there are no regrets and there is no unfinished life, work, or business. The best that you can. And the sooner you plan, the sooner you're going to have things, and you're going to be able to release that aspect of your life, knowing my wishes, not only my financial and my business and my family wishes, but also my spiritual wishes and my legacy are mapped out. Write things down. Plan your own funeral. Write your own eulogy. Do things that are going to help you ground your intention on living to the fullest. And I think if we embrace death, dance with death, walk gracefully towards death, as from the moment we are born, we are walking towards our own mortality and our own death, I think we have the opportunity to live more fully and more regeneratively. So my invitation to you today is to embrace death with open arms, with reverence, with the sacredness that it is. Death is as sacred as life itself. And I think we need to start thinking more about how sacred death is. And I think my wife and I were very inspired by the passing of my grandmother, and how the rites of passage and the ritual around death in the Hindu tradition are much more celebratory. They're much more colorful, with flowers everywhere, anointing the body, and actually spending time with the body after the soul and the last breath has left the body, and being comfortable with a lifeless body, which was the temple for all those years, carrying that soul. This is the skin of the soul, is that body, but the body is impermanent. The soul is permanent, and the essence and the memory. So the most regenerative thing that we can do in Ximena's honor is embrace and honor our own death and our own mortality, and live to the fullest in the most healthy manner, but really embrace death with a familiarity and a reverence and a sacredness that it is, and plan the way that you want to have your end of life, whether it's early in life, middle, or late in life. One never knows when it's your time, but think about it. Think about what matters to you, and don't wait until, something happens that, you may not have the appropriate amount of time to really put into it. Dedicate a time to go to a death positive retreat. Dedicate time to write your eulogy. Dedicate time to thinking about your life and your afterlife, and what it is that you want to manifest and how to manifest that. And I believe that you will live a much more fulfilling and a much more full life, embracing death, because we're all going to die. It's one of the most natural, sure things that we can all count on. So wishing you all a regenerative life and a regenerative approach to death and dying, which is one of the most sacred and beautiful acts that we will all experience, and profound. And the spiritual growth that comes from having someone as close as Ximena was to myself die, there's no greater teacher than that. And it's what you do with that teaching that really determines how you will advance and progress in your own life. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Many blessings. See you next time.